Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. FP2 in Saudi Arabia has just finished, and apart from a few little niggles, it was a fairly clean two sessions, FP1 and FP2. I said in my predictions that Saudi is unforgiving and it will punish the smallest of mistakes, and on the whole, the drivers did fairly well, and I was quite impressed by some of the rookies because there was no real incidents for the majority of them. I mean, one of them didn't do any running in FP2 at all, but on the whole, it was a fairly decent two sessions for them. Watching practice sessions I can see where people would find it quite boring because there is a lot of time spent in the pits getting small little tweaks and changes done to the cars so that, they can find the optimal setting to really go and attack for a qualifying or for, getting that fine balance in between being as fast as possible for qualifying but also having good race trim. And tracks like Saudi are one of the rare instances where you never really see the cars in the pits. Like, every car is on the track as much as possible because tracks like Saudi, what is more important is building the driver confidence. They need to feel confident going around that track in their car. And that confidence will benefit them more and give them more back in return than a small setup change on the car, because confidence is key going around Saudi. So kicking off with FP1, where fastest in that session was Pierre Gasly. And I don't think anybody seen that coming, to be quite honest with you. I was quite shocked. I know that FP1 is not really a comparative session because it being a different time of day and the track temperatures are usually quite high. The temperature generally is really quite high. FP2 is obviously your more comparative session, with being the same time of day as the qualifying and the race, and the track temperatures are probably going to be quite similar and all that kind of stuff. So do I think Gasly being top of the timesheets in FP1 means that he could top the timesheets in qualifying? No. It's obviously not a bad thing. It's very promising for Gasly and for Alpine that they can put in lap times like that, because it was a decent lap time, a 1:29.2, I believe it was. And he's pulling out some pretty decent performances over these past couple of races. And we've heard it been said before that, if that Alpine had a McLaren engine, well, that would actually be a Mercedes engine, but if they had a Mercedes engine or a Ferrari engine or something that's not what they currently run, which is a Renault engine, they would probably be fighting at the front. They would be fighting for podiums and potentially pole positions because the chassis on that car is incredibly good. And they've built a very good race car. The only thing I think that is really letting them down is that engine. So, stunning performance in FP1 from Pierre Gasly. And I think it's confidence building for him and that team that they can actually go and, put in a real fight in qualifying. And I think we'll see Gasly in Q3. I think we'll see him in Q3. Out with Gasly, the top four was kind of what you would expect it to be. It's McLaren's, split by a Ferrari. So Norris, Leclerc, Piastri. We've got Albon in P5 and Sainz in P7. And I have to say, the Williams is actually looking pretty decent around Saudi so far. They had a pretty decent showing in FP1, both the drivers, and Sainz had a stunning FP2 as well, with a pretty competitive lap time and a decent finishing. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on Williams this weekend because I'm hoping that this is going to be quite a big weekend for them. If they can get a decent qualifying in, it is quite hard to overtake in Saudi. So it's hopeful that, if they can get a decent qualifying in, they could hopefully score some big points. The rest of the top 10 was kind of who you expect to see, your Russells, your Hamiltons, Verstappens, Tsunodas, that kind of stuff. So it was fairly business as usual, apart from the stunning time from Pierre Gasly and the Williams looking pretty decent in FP1. Now, FP1 was incredibly hot. It was the middle of the afternoon, the temperatures were high, the track temps were high. So whilst we've seen lots of laps and quite a few push laps, there was even more of cooling down because everything was so high. A lot of the teams have made changes to their cars to help with that cooling because I think it is even hotter than than what it was in Bahrain. One thing I will say is that even though the temps were high, grip was never really a problem for the drivers. It is quite a grippy track. We did, however, see quite a few lockups. Oliver Bearman, very lucky to have not put his car into the wall. He had a huge front lockup and he clipped the wall. He's very lucky not to have actually fully sent his car into the wall and written that off. As I said, FP1 was just building confidence in the track for the drivers. It was just lots and lots and lots of laps, especially for the rookies, and a very tricky on a knife edge track. And it's stunning to watch, but it is quite nerve-wracking to see the drivers going round. I think it's the second fastest track on the calendar outside of Monza, and it's so much more tighter, twistier. So yeah, FP1 was all just about building confidence, but a couple of standout results from Williams, and especially from Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Moving on to FP2, which is, as I said, the most comparative session, and it is probably what you expect to see with the sort of timings. There was a load of qualifying runs at the beginning of the session, and then it was a few more sort of race trim runs. And topping the timesheets in FP2, and probably a surprise to no one, was Lando Norris. He finished that session with a 128.2. However, his teammate Piastri is just a tenth and a half behind him with a 128.4, I believe it was. Now, what I imagine happening in qualifying is the same as what happened in FP2, where, you know, Lando goes quickest, then it's Oscar, then it's Lando, then it's Oscar. They just, as the track came to them, both those drivers started to put in better times, and it was just a little bit of, you know, knocking the other one down only to get knocked down yourself by your teammate. So it does seem that they are definitely the cars to be, as we all expected, but the pack is pretty close, and there are a couple of drivers that I do think could cause a wee bit of an issue for those McLaren boys. One being Max Verstappen. Now listen, I know I said in my predictions that I thought they were probably going to have a bit of a tricky time because they're not comfortable in the car and you need to have absolute confidence in your machinery going around a track like this. But you can never count Max Verstappen out, can you? He finished the session P3 with a 128.5. He's 2/10 off Norris. If he can hook up a stunning lap, he could very well be on pole. And that is something that Max Verstappen is very good at. He, you know, you watch these practice sessions and you think, God, Verstappen's not really having a great time out there. And then it comes to qualifying and he puts in the best lap that you've ever seen and he's on pole. So keep an eye out for Max Verstappen. The other driver that I think could maybe pose a bit of an issue to the McLarens is actually Charles Leclerc, who I thought I was full delulu when I made my predictions and said that we could see Charles Leclerc on a podium. And actually, I don't feel that delusional after FP2. The changes they've made to the car, when Charles Leclerc was talking to the media and he said, you know, we've made these changes and I think that we will see the full benefits of them this weekend, and, you know, I'm quite positive going in and I think this will be really good for us. I thought it was just all media talk. I thought it was just, you know, a bit of PR to make us all not want to throw ourselves out the window, Ferrari fans. But actually, he was putting in some tasty laps. Like, he was putting in some very competitive times. He's 4/10 off Norris, which in Formula One standards is huge, but Charles Leclerc is also an incredibly good qualifier. So the delusion has been feeded, and I am Charles Leclerc pole position. Listen, stranger things have happened in Formula One, and I do genuinely believe that Charles Leclerc is posing quite a threat to the McLaren drivers, along with Max Verstappen. I think it could be any of those four. And I also wouldn't count out George Russell because he's had some pretty stellar qualifying performances, and I think he is experiencing some high-speed bouncing. It's a bit of a worry considering this entire track is high speed. So I imagine that is something that they will look into between FP2 and FP3 tomorrow, and they will make sort of some changes, and a lot of FP3 will be trying to just get that car in an optimal window that he can really can really attack in the car and put his absolute everything into it and not, get compromised through any sort of bouncing or anything like that. As I said, Sainz was looking very good out there. Very good. And there's no upgrades or changes or anything to the Williams for this weekend. So I think that actually the car might just quite suit this track, which is nice. I'm just praying for a good result from Carlos Sainz. I can't go through. It was all looking so promising coming into the season, and it's just been disappointment after disappointment. I am hoping that this is, the race where we get a solid result from him. He finished FP2 fifth fastest, so I'm thinking, that's a good sign. Albon, 10th fastest. I'm thinking good points for Williams this weekend. I want to quickly just mention the rookies before I talk about a couple of on-track incidents that I want to discuss. So Bortoleto did absolutely no running in FP2 because the team had found a fuel leak on the car and they just couldn't get it fixed in time. That whole car was getting taken apart whilst the team tried to figure out what the issue was. So no running for Bortoleto. I do think there was some decent performances. I think Antonelli and Hadjar finishing FP2 11th and 12th is probably about right for their first time racing. Well, not racing, but first time in F1 machinery on this track in a sort of a comparative situation to qualifying and the race. I do think that they will probably climb a little bit higher up. I do reckon we'll see Q3 appearances from both of them. There was a few, clipping the walls here and there, which is something that, all the drivers do it. Every single one of them does it. We're coming to talk about a very experienced driver who had a bit of an issue towards the end of the session. But it's looking promising for Antonelli and Hadjar. Behrman, kind of thought he would maybe be a little bit further up. He finished FP2 P16, but he's obviously not in Ferrari machinery. He's in Haas machinery, albeit it's the same engine. But I thought he would be the one that would be, really putting a show in. But it is a Haas he's driving, so I do just have to remember that. And I think we could see a wee Q2 appearance for Behrman, potentially. Doohan finishing P17. Am I surprised? Not really. I thought he might struggle. Lawson, 14. It's so-so. I do think he will get out-qualified by his teammate, though. I do think Hadjar will have a bit of an edge on him, to be honest with you. But going to a track like Saudi that, as I said, is completely punishing, the first time that the majority of these rookies have actually driven Formula One machinery, for them to have a wee clip of the wall here and there, I don't think but I think it could be a lot worse, to be honest. I think we could have seen some pretty big accidents. One accident we almost saw was Alex Albon nearly running into the back of Lewis Hamilton in a moment that nearly had me out of my chair because, it was close. Now, this whole incident was referred to the stewards and Hamilton was actually found to have impeded Alex Albon. Now, Albon was coming into turn 16 on a fast lap. Hamilton was sort of coming round 17 on a slow lap. And the issue with this track is it is completely blind. You're so blind going around this track of what is in front of you and even like what's behind you because you cannot see round these corners. I'm surprised there's not more incidents like this. And I know that the teams do tell the drivers that, there's somebody coming up behind you, but it was so close. Albon came round 16, Hamilton was right there on 17, and Albon had to sort of take evasive action, otherwise he would have been straight into the back of Hamilton. And I honestly, my heart was in my mouth. Like, it was so scary to watch. And I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely terrifying. This track, I love it. It's one of my favourites because of how much risk the drivers have to take, and it's the risk versus the reward. And it's such a interesting track for these drivers, and it's so fun to watch, but my God, is it terrifying when things like this happen. It was referred to the stewards. They had said because it was a practice session, no further action because it wasn't really deemed as being dangerous. I potentially would maybe disagree with the dangerous part of it because had Alex Albon not had lightning quick instincts, he would have gone straight into the back of Hamilton. And finally, just when you thought FP2 was over, right at the very end, Yuki Tsunoda sticks it into the wall. Coming round the final corner, Yuki Tsunoda clipped the inside barrier with, I think he just had the steering locked too far. Hit the inside barrier with his front left, broke the steering base, and just went straight into the outside barrier on the other side of the pit straight. I do think that there was an awful lot of damage for not a huge high speed impact. He wasn't going particularly fast. It's quite a slow corner, I mean, for that track, but I think it's lesson learned, to be honest with you. I think it is a driver error. I don't think it was an issue with the car or anything like that. I think he just had his steering a bit too far to the left and didn't correct in time to not have his wheel clip the barrier. And it's a shame that it's ended like that, because that will have slightly knocked his confidence, but he was doing pretty well. In FP1, he was a couple of thousandths off Verstappen. He was right behind him, which is very promising. And then in FP2, he was 4/10 off Verstappen, but in a seat where the second driver has really struggled, you know, Checo struggled to keep it beside Max, Lawson struggled with the exact same car to be beside Max. Yuki's looking promising, and it's just a little bit of a mistake and an error that's cost him. FP3, I think, will be for Yuki just building back the confidence in the car round that track, specifically round that corner. I mean, it's a corner that caught quite a few people out. There was quite a lot of, not even clips, but quite chunky bits of contact between some of the drivers in that barrier. So it's unfortunate for him, but I do think it is lesson learned. And I do imagine that, you know, Yuki's got the potential to get into Q3 here, and that should be the driving force, to be honest with you, because he was looking pretty decent, and I do think that he has the capabilities to stick that car close to Max Verstappen, and that is so important right now. I was actually sitting thinking, God, FP2's been quite chill, hasn't it? Like, yeah, there's been the odd, like, love tap to the barriers and stuff like that, but on the whole, yeah, we're doing all right. And then right at the end, the session obviously got red flagged, and it restarted with like a minute to go, so it was just practice starts for the end of FP2. But I do think coming into FP3, which is, I think it will just be, again, another sort of confidence building session. I think the teams have gotten so much data from FP2 with the qualifying and the race runs that FP3 will just be sort of ironing out any niggly issues with the car and making sure the setup is absolute on point for qualifying later on tomorrow, sorry. And I do think that it is one of the McLarens, but potentially a Verstappen or Leclerc on pole. That is everything from us. We'll be back after qualifying tomorrow. Who do you think is sticking on pole? Let me know in the comments. I shall see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. I love you. Bye.